Hello and welcome to the Life Burst Podcast. This is a channel where we talk about all things Wixoss related. And today we're continuing our sample deck lists as well as just team breakdowns here. And today we're going to be talking about Bang. Now, something interesting you'll note right away when you look at this is that this is a mixed team. This is going to be Bang Dream Team. I do actually have a standard team to talk about as well a little bit later down the line. I am a fan of Uchu. But if you guys want to hear more about sample deck lists, metas, and other things Wixoss related, don't forget to subscribe. And down in the comments below, let me know what you are excited for in changing Diva. I genuinely want to get a scope of what the community is interested in potentially doing. I actually really like Bang quite a bit. I fancy myself more of an aggressive mid-range player, if I'm going to be honest with you, than any other archetype. Although, yes, I do play a fair amount of control, since I guess I do play quite a bit of Dr. Tamago. But this has really started where I started feeling more at home in. Bang, let's go ahead and talk about what Bang does as a level 3, just to sort of get to the idea behind what kind of decks you want to be building as Bang, and whether or not you should be doing anything interesting with it. Now, Bang is got the team, Uchu no Hajimari, but you don't have to play it on a team. You do miss certain things if you do not play it on a team, right? The team enter is the thing that you're going to be missing, which is your team enter is your opponent chooses a Signy on their field and then puts it into their enter zone. So it opens up a lane, which is good. You know, opening up a lane is always a great thing in Wixoss. So putting it on a team, you're almost always guaranteeing yourself that you're going to get yourself a life burst damage. But if you miss on that, it's not the worst, because the opponent does get to choose what it is, so they're going to obviously take the weakest thing that's on the field, so you're not like snagging something really, really important. Your auto ability is at the beginning of your attack phase. If there are 5 or more cards underneath this L-Rig, you get to enter charge 1, and if there are 7 or more cards underneath it, then target level 3 Signy on your field gains a Lancer until end of turn. So just like Tamago, it's got the Uchu signature ability of curbying up everything that's underneath your assist L-Rigs, putting it all together, and then you have something that does either one thing, or if you manage to assist grow all the way up to level 2 on both your assists, and you eat their level 1s and their level 0s, okay, cool, that's enough to make it that 7, so you're getting the second more powerful thing. And then the action ability is, like I just said, you put all the cards underneath this L-Rig into your L-Rig. So, let's talk about that. Access to easy enter charge is quite good. There's a lot of green things that specifically trigger on attacks if you've basically enter charged this turn. It does something, and this enables it. This is the easiest way to enable that, period, in Wixoss. Outside of that, you also gain Lancer until end of turn. Now, that is quite good, to be honest with you. Getting yourself a Lancer, it will almost always put the pressure on the opponent. This is going to inevitably push it towards either two different directions. You're either going to end up being in a more mid-range direction, or going to be more in a control direction. There is a world where that actually pushes itself towards an aggro direction as well. There's not really any great early green aggro. Aggressive strategies, generally speaking, end up in white and red, but if there was a world where there was a green aggro deck, then this inevitably would be a very good top end, because then you're saying, all right, well, now I'm getting reach to really just get me to the end here. But the enter charge is more important, and more the first thing that you should be building around is getting that easy enter charge one. Now, as I've tested, as with a lot of our people who watch our channel have been testing along with me, they're saying things like, this shout out should go to probably Dylan. This is saying that inevitably you're not going to be getting a actual ton of enter out of this. Just getting a reliable 1 enter charge extra per turn, when you start getting to that late game, does give you a good amount of enter to work with, but it's not a mountain of enter to work with. So again, that's not going to be leading you towards being like a ramp deck, for example. You're probably just going to be a little bit more able to do activated abilities, which green has quite a bit of, with on your Signies. And then getting Lancer is something that you should be thinking about, like, well, I'm not always getting Lancer with it. Sometimes you got to pull the trigger sooner. But the Lancer thing is really great because it's basically saying the game is going to end at some point, and it's going like you're just transforming literally every level 3 green Signies on your field into threats every single turn. Because of that, does actually put a little bit of building restrictions on you. You have to play with almost all level 3 Signies on your field. Like that, you're not doing anything extra. You are playing with level 3 green Signies, and that's it. You're not going to be trying anything fancy. You can occasionally put in your flex spots some other level 3s that might not be green, but you absolutely should have at least 12 or more level 3 green Signies in here. So that's a real deck constriction cost. And again, opening up yourself a lane with its team ability would mean that you are threatening 2 life cloth damages per turn pretty often. So pretty good overall. It is, again, restrictive because of the fact that you need green, and you also want to basically Kirby up your assists very quickly. You want your options are limited to basically assists that grow quicker. Okay, so without any further ado, let's just go into the deck. We'll talk about the core of the deck as well as just the other types of things that you can be running in this deck. So you'll see with this Dream Team that I'm actually using a Love It assist line as well as an Umer assist line. The shout out should also go to Dylan, again, for turning me on to Umer. He recently won I think the March We Cross party with Umer Center, and pretty much everyone that I've talked to, including people who have played against him, has said that Umer Clear has been the real winner of that type of thing. The fact that, yes, it can smooth out your hand, aka you can dump all the cards that aren't late game level 3 green Signies and try to find other things, as well as get yourself some guards pretty quickly. But this being able to freeze target Elrigs on your opponent's field really does help stop team pieces from activating, because most team pieces require an on-attack trigger, and so if you freeze their level 2 downed Elrig, generally speaking, that means you are going to deprive them of being able to use their team ability until turn 4, and that might turn the favor in your hand. Also, discarding your opponent's hand and having them yes, 1 less is not a ton less, so it's basically the equivalent of discard 1, but you got to remember a lot of decks sculpt their hands to get to that point, so just like they might be discarding 2 guards at that point because those are things that they were trying to hold on to. So that's the real reason you want to be running Umer Clear. Umer Draw is just your standard draw 2 extra cards, and it's always going to be a good thing, especially with Bang, which does want to get some early game fixing in terms of hand fixing. But then I run DJ Love It, and I think you could probably make a case to run Hirana as what do you call it? An assist as well. But I think DJ Love It's just got a pretty good ability here. Just being able to vanish almost anything on your opponent's side of the field early game to get in some early damage is nice. And Crossfade, this is one of the few decks that inevitably you will be doing both of the abilities 50-50% of the time. You are going to be enter charging quite a bit, so you actually can pull off the crush the opponent's life cloth a good amount of the time. And then prior to that, it's just an attack phase, very cheap way to get rid of something on the opponent's field. And that helps you defensively and offensively. So that's the Elrig deck, at least in terms of the team that you want to be going for. We opted to go with Ancient Echo, which is pretty close to on power rate with a bunch of team pieces. So you really, with this deck, aren't feeling like, oh no, I missed being on a team. Because, again, with Uchu, Fenrir is the team Signy of choice. Therefore, and Fenrir is a blue level 3 Signy, so it's not really working for this deck anyways. but this does have the requirements that you need a red, a blue, and a green, and it gives you a pretty solid effect, which is that for 2 enter, you can vanish something, so 2 enter to open up a lane. Then you also give a power boost to your entire team, which does matter at times, and you get to draw 2 cards, so that's going to refill your hand a little later in the game. So that helps bridge the gap of kind of issues with mid-range decks in Wixoss, where they want to be aggressive, and if they empty out their hand pretty aggressively, then they can't survive to keep fighting against the decks, because they're slightly too slow against the decks that are more controlling. So drawing the extra cards actually does get you there. Literally every mode in this piece is powerful and good for your deck. But what's in the Signy deck itself? Let's talk about it. We've got Servant, of course, that's always your standard 4 of. But in the 1-drop slots, we should talk about Julius. Julius is really good. You're never going to activate this turn 1, maybe not even turn 2, in all honesty, but you will be activating it turn 3 and on. And it is not the greatest turn 3 and on. Vanishing something that's power 8,000 or less is much better early in the game, for sure. But it will do the job for you, which is a level 1 that will chump block, as well as hit Life Cloth that you open up with your DJ Lovett abilities. So it does the job, that you want a 1 to do, which is that it is good in the early game and relevant in the later game, and this is both good in the early game and relevant in the later game. Once you get that reliable ability to enter charge every turn, this becomes much, much better, and you will still snag things that the opponent puts out to chump block. Even a lot of level 2s are, something like 7,000. Oh god, you're blowing. I'm trying the name. Hajiki in the Madoka deck, for example, is turns into a 10,000 when it attacks and makes you discard cards. However, it also is a 7,000 on your turn, so this still does hit things like that. Of course, you're going to be running the classic Trinity Red. Actually, not the Trinity Red. You're just going to be running Lancelot. Lancelot's the one that you're still running. This is a red deck. You should be running Lancelot. It will always open up lanes for you. And then the other part of Trinity Red that you're going to be using is Deafening Inferno, which is, vanish target Signy on your opponent's field with 8,000 power or less. You're not no limit, so you don't have to worry about this text, but 8,000 or less is good. It's not quite as good, which is why it's a 2 of. Here, I don't love the Life Burst, for example, but it's part of our 4 flex spots that we had, and I wanted a little bit more lane opening, but not. I found that 4 was too many. Like, I had too many things that were already opening lanes that I didn't need for Deafening Infernos. 2 was enough to get there. Let's talk about some more lane openers. We've got Osaka Getsune. Osaka Getsune is super, super, super reliable in this deck. It's probably the most reliable it can get. You will trigger it every turn, so you will be able to continuously vanish Signy that are 12,000 power or more on your opponent's field for 2 enter. 1 enter if you want to be clever and be like, oh, well, I'm getting a free enter every time I go into attack. This really balances really, really well with Reds doing early game Signy removal, and this will become your late game Signy removal. It's worth mentioning also that you can target your opponent's Signy and then grow them to over 12,000, then vanish them, but it's not super necessary in this deck. I actually found myself not really doing that all that much and actually using the pump on my own Signy more often than not to get them out of range for certain things. Plus, it's super relevant that you're going to be able to pump your own Signy and then give those Signy Lancer so they win. Again, it's got to be a level 3 or above, but it does let you win combats. There are times where that is pretty relatively important. So that is an amazing card in here. Then we've got, just going down the line here, we've got a little bit of Buffalo. Now you'll notice this is a level 3 Signy that is not green, but if you count how many level 3 Signys are green, you'll still see that the required 12 amount is being hit. This is the other 2 flex spots I was talking about. Whenever another Terror Beast enters the field, this Signy and that Signy that enter the field both get 4,000 power till end of turn. At the beginning of your attack phase, all Signy on your field with power 20,000 or more. Gain auto. When this Signy attacks, you may pay red, colorless. If you do, vanish target Signy in front of this Signy with power 12,000 or less until end of turn. So this is sort of the counterpart to it. The cool thing is, like I said, you've got a lot of team pump in this. Between Osaka Getsoon, some Amiibo, some Amido Acids, as well as your piece, and the fact that you do have a fair amount of Terra Beasts in this deck, you will be reliably triggering this often. I have had games where I've triggered this with one of my field one turn 3, and then was able to put it on all 3 of my Signies. And then the next turn, I had a completely empty field, drew a Buffalo, did it again. All 3 of them buffed up. Because it's a Buffalo. The cool thing to talk about with Buffalo here is that it gives the Signy the ability, so the opponent's got awkward timing twice. Not only does this do this before they can react and remove the Buffalo, so it will always give all of your Signy this ability to do this, even if they remove the Buffalo, because it's before they can respond in their attack phase timing. Because it's on an attack trigger, they lose the window again, and it becomes a thing where you can open up lanes, and they've missed the ability to grow, and you did not supply them with Enter to grow with. I think it's very good. Again, I'm only running it as a 2 of, and that seems to be correct here, because again, I want more of those level 3 green Signies. Let's go back to our level 1s just to clear out what they are, since I think I talked about the most important pieces of the deck now. We've got 4 Pandada. This is just the important part is it's a Terror Beast. This deck is quite greedy when it comes to multicolored, because it uses an equal amount of red as it uses an equal amount of green. So it's important to have some of these, and you should be aware of what color you're taking at any points in times to just ensure that you are not going to color screw yourself at any point. We have more level 1s. Yeah, ceta. So ceta is a filler card. It could get replaced very easily down the line, hopefully with something green. Actually, I think I have something in mind that I would use, but we're not in that meta yet, so don't worry about it. And ceta, it just has a good life burst, right? It's just target Signy on your opponent's field with 8,000 or less, gets vanished. I love this life burst. I think it's super great. And otherwise, it's just a chump blocker that also attacks well and enters. You can put in your enter. So it's okay. And that's our level 1s. Talking about going into our level 2s now. I actually have used this a lot in the early metas. We're talking 0-0 meta. Celadon Phantom Terra Beast. Again, it's got the Terra Beast thing. Again, it's got this awkwardness that when it comes in, you need to discard a card, but when it's vanished, you get to draw a card, and that's kind of stinky, because there's a lot of bounce effects in Wixoss that bounce it to your hand or bounce it to your deck, and if that happens, yeah, you just lost a card. You're not getting a card back. Its life burst ability is actually quite good. I don't love paying to vanish Signies, but paying to vanish 12,000 or less Signy is fine, because sometimes late in the game, right, you've got the opponent's just attacked with some huge Signy, and you need to vanish it, and you're like, yeah, I'd rather it say that than upped, is what I'm trying to say late game. So, Celadon is pretty solid here. The most important part is it's 12,000 power Terra Beast. So when you go in with your Terra Beast God, specifically Buffalo, this gets over a certain threshold in order to start doing the removal. So that's one of the reasons I like it, and that's one of the reasons I have it, for example, over Kayasumi, which you could also be playing in this spot. But I like it because it's a Terra Beast, and I like it because it inevitably hits that threshold that we're trying to hit. There's a small amount of team buff, but it's worth mentioning here. And that's going to be our level 2s. Our level 3s that we haven't talked about yet are going to be Fennec. Fennec is something I'm trying. I assume you could also use Flopsy here, and it would be doing the job just as well. But I actually like this weird Fennec ability, where at the beginning of each attack phase, the Signy's base power becomes equal to target Signy's until end of turn. So you can actually copy team buffs, which is pretty cool. And you can sort of, that again goes with that Terra Beast theme. Again, Flopsy's also a Terra Beast, so it's not like you can't swap it with Flopsy. And then you have this other ability that says when a Signy on your field with power 15,000 or more attacks, you get to enter charge an extra time. So it gives you more enter charge. Inevitably, you're going to be reliably enter charging with your center, but a lot of the late game enter stuff that you want is 2 enter or more. So being able to enter charge on the attack and then being able to enter charge on this attacking means that now you can actually pay for a lot of these on attack removals that Osage Getsun or Buffalo gives you. And so I quite like it that way. And then I've got just a smattering of level 3s that are green that just sort of finish out the things. I got Influenza type D here. I don't love this card. It's a good lightning rod in the fact that if your opponent targets it with an ability or an effect at least once a turn, then it can draw a card and enter charge one. So when it dies, at least it doesn't go silently into the night like most Signy do. Therefore, it's a fine thing to put Lancer on and bait them into removal. I've used its ability like twice in testing, and we've tested quite a lot. So it does come up, but it's not enough for me to be like, oh yeah, its ability when it attacks, you're vanishing 2 Signies all the time. You're not vanishing 2 Signies all that much with it. So it is like, if you get into, like, there has been a game against Madoka where I was like, it was ungodly. We were like already on turn 7, which is long for Bang, because I was forced into not being able to do the Lancer ability. And it ended up being like, I drew this and was like, oh, I have the win now. So it's good in those scenarios, but generally speaking, your games of Wixoss are going to go to turn 4 or turn 5, not turn 7, where this really shines. But yeah, it as for getting the last bits of damage in there as a level 3 green Signy requirement that you need for this deck, it gets there. And I like Amino Acid. I used to play 4 Deafening Infernos, but then I swapped it to Amino Acid. This is a good tech against a lot of Madokas and a lot of Musicas, just because it's like, it looks at their removal and goes, ha, no worries, I'm going to be on the field forever. And then also gives a team buff to your guys, which again, Lancer, the ability Lancer likes seeing it be put onto big Signy, so hitting these requirements is pretty good. It's a Life Burst, being able to enter charge is cool, and then the next time you take damage from Signy this turn, you said you do not take this damage. It's okay, but it gets you to that 12 requirement that you need. So you can mix it up, you could try some other stuff. I really like this version of the deck because I do think that inevitably it kind of feels like you're a linebacker and you're just sort of pushing open up paths constantly for your quarterback to get in these life cloth damage. And I think inevitably if you had the hankering for a very big green Signy damage deck, and you liked Ott, for example, this would be a very, very good upgrade to it. I actually have tested this quite a bit, and it does fairly well in the metagame. It doesn't do super great against the super fast decks, although it can still put up some defense and manage against those decks. But what it really shines against is other mid-range decks and other slow decks. So it wrecks Dr. Tamago, Madoka, Musica, for example, and it can even do a pretty good job against Card Jockey. But if your meta is a little bit more slow, you can bring this. This is the wallbreaker, man. This is you will look at all people setting up any form of stall strategy in front of you and laugh, because you will never be stalled by this. You will have open lanes in the early game, in the mid game, and the late game. You will look at their walls and go, yep, that doesn't matter. My creatures have Lancer and are still bigger than yours. So that's what I suggest you run. But if you wanted to run something more team-oriented, I also have a Uchu set for you, in case you guys want this. The issue is, and I'll say it once, I'll say it again, I'll say it a million times, which is that Nova Mute is not all that great. It is fun and surprising for people because it's I think the only level 1 attack phase timing grow that you can do, which is cool. And I think is worth maybe mentioning for a later version of this deck, probably. In the next set, I believe a new piece comes out called GGG, which grows anytime, which gives you a enter charge anytime you grow once a turn. So you look specifically for things that can grow on your opponent's turn, and this can very early on. So it has the ability to negate an attack at the cost of a card and an enter. It's not a small, like, to be clear here, it doesn't draw a card back either. It's not a small fee. You really do feel that in the early game, since this deck is a mid game. It's sort of, it wishes it had a better early game. So, and also losing that early game enter that you will inevitably get back with your enter charging from Bang, but losing it and not being able to basically vanish something on your turn with your other effects hurts a little bit. But the other Tamago the other Nova that we're using is Nova Slash. There's another Nova that grows for 0. I don't think it's very good. Its ability is not good either. So you are reliably making sure that you can get Lancer on Bang by growing 0, but you also are giving up quite a bit of power to do so, and I do not think it's correct to do that. The Tamagos that we got here are pretty much the Tamago assists that you'll always see, even in Dream Breaks. You've got Tamago Double Stroke, which just draws 2 extra cards, and then Tamago Jet Stick, which downs the opponent, but also draws more cards. It's solid. This is a very, very solid assist line. So there is a certain amount of power to be had there. I actually used it a bit in the Dream Team as well. I liked Umira a little bit better, but inevitably that is something that you can do as well. As far as pieces that we're going to be using, we're going to use Happening Destruction, and you're mostly going to be using it to make the opponent discard cards. It really only is, it's not like a control sort of tool like it is in Tamago, where you're making them discard and then you keep them discarded for the rest of their life. It really more is just speed bump. They will draw out of this discard, but it does stop them from having things like guards for a little bit. And inevitably, it's just a little bit of mess up on your opponent's hand. So think of it more like tempo than a controlled setup. And we've got Xenocluster. Xenocluster is really important here, less because of the ability that it counters certain decks, which is important that it does, but also the fact that it enter charges 1 during your attack phase. So you can, for example, get off an early... This is one of the few times where you can actually get off an early Para-Julius attack, even like turn 1, turn 2. Because you can just give up your piece, which you should do if the deck that you're playing against does not have any discard or enter burn. If you can successfully be like, oh yeah, I'm against Sandbaka, they don't have any discard or enter burn, you should just do that. You should use it as soon as possible, so that way you can either get an extra card in your hand, or perhaps you can get an extra enter in your field just so that you can work with it. Other than that, we're using this is a wall deck. So your setup is to control the flow of the early game, restrict what they can do, and then be like, okay, my walls can now crush whatever you're doing. So I got this list and very, very basically changed it from the winning Japanese tournament list. I didn't make a ton of changes here. I left it mostly as to what it was. And then when I played it, it played okay. It played like a Dr. Tamago that's a little less successful, which might be what you're looking for. But what it did that Dr. Tamago didn't do very well was open up lanes. So if you're like, I want to be Dr. Tamago, but I also just want more lanes opening, then switching your center to Bang might be the answer for you. It uses the same sort of Dr. Tamago strategy of early game with Zhao Yun and Hanel to basically get yourself early ways to stop bleeding. It's running some ways to cycle as just to get yourself to that late game that you're trying to get to here. And then again, it's got Para-Julius because Para-Julius is too good to give up in this deck. Your level 2s mostly are going to be on the back of He in order to restrict your opponent's attacks, as well as Kayasumi to just like really gum the field up. And then we've got some strange one too, like Amazonius. These are to hit life burst requirements, but they're pretty good. And then our level 3s are also a little weird. we've got Quinn. Quinn's ability to give you give negative power on the opponent's field means that your Lancer's going to hit more often than not. Just because it's doing the opposite of what the other team did. Instead of growing your team, it's shrinking your opponent's team, which is arguably better. And then you can also move things to be more advantageous, so that way when they attack you, they end up not being able to attack you very efficiently. We're also running Gouache. I don't like Gouache in a nutshell, but I do think that it is successful in this deck. I can't exactly put my finger on to why. It might be just because it helps draw extra cards than the deck wants, more late game draw, because it's way later game than the other Bang decks are. So it's sort of like that. I've never really used the ability to stall with it, but it does inevitably help you take your extra enter when you start getting to this point where you're like, I have a million enter and nothing to do with it, where you can start recycling stuff like guards, for example, from your enter into your hand. So I would, it's fine here. It's not utterly amazing. And then we've got some more, like a lot of these life bursts make up for the fact that you don't have red lane opening. That's why you've got things like Jade Evil here to do some more life burst lane opening. It's also huge. And that's the deck in a nutshell. Basically, you got Atalanta, by the way, too, which is another way to lane open in green. It's not super efficient, but it gets the job done. And if you are enter charging quite a bit, you've got a lot of options to choose from. Overall, I think this deck is, it is the king of late game control decks. So if you wanted to be a wall stall deck, but you also wanted to crush all wall stall decks, I would play this. This very much does that kind of thing. Again, I like the aggression that Red brings in with the mixed team a little bit better, just because I think it gives you a better shot at winning shorter games, and I think shorter games means that you're depriving your opponents of more options. They can't wiggle out of it. But this does a very good impression of, I'm an incredibly slow mid-range control deck, but I have bites. I can fight back. Again, if you ended up in a meta that was like all Uchu, then this would be the way to go. This counters control strategies perfectly, as well as gives you a fighting chance against more of the aggro stuff. But if they're hyper aggro, it's a little difficult to control it anyways, just because the hyper aggro is just difficult to control without any form of clock. But that's your choices for Bang, I think. Inevitably, I'd love to hear what you guys have shown in your testing, what you guys have won with, which you prefer. Bang is one of my more excited entries into this meta, and I just want to hear what other people are doing. So, as always, subscribe if you want to hear more cool content about the different deck lists that you could do, how to play against these decks, for example, and just learn how they function, as well as for the podcast. This is Andrew with the Life Burst podcast. As always, I hope you guys flip a Life Burst.